Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a major geopolitical flashpoint that's sending shockwaves across Europe and beyond. Reports have emerged that Denmark is taking decisive steps to cut off Russia's vital Baltic Sea route, a move that could choke Moscow's access to crucial trade and energy exports. This development has triggered what many are calling panic in the Kremlin, and it's easy to see why. The Baltic Sea is one of Russia's last remaining maritime lifelines to global markets, and losing control or even limited access to it could be disastrous for Vladimir Putin's war-driven economy. To understand why this is such a big deal, we have to look at geography. The Baltic Sea is bordered by NATO and EU members almost entirely now. Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Poland, the Baltic States, all aligned against Russia. The only significant Russian ports there are in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad. For Russian oil, grain, and goods to reach the open ocean, they must pass through the narrow Danish Straits connecting the Baltic to the North Sea. These straits are effectively under Denmark's control, and under international law, Denmark has the right to regulate transit through them, especially when it comes to environmental safety, shipping standards, and sanction compliance. By tightening its control, Denmark isn't just inspecting ships, it's squeezing one of Russia's few remaining arteries to the west. The catalyst for this escalation has been Russia's so-called shadow fleet, a collection of aging tankers and unregistered ships used to transport oil and other goods outside Western sanctions. Many of these vessels operate without proper insurance, frequently switch national flags, and even disable their tracking systems to evade detection. Denmark has grown increasingly concerned that these ships pose environmental hazards and potential security threats. The country has now announced stricter inspection policies that could delay, detain, or even deny passage to such vessels. In practice, this move could significantly disrupt Russian exports, effectively cutting off or slowing down maritime traffic in the Baltic. Moscow's reaction has been predictably furious. Russian officials have condemned Denmark's actions as provocative and illegal, accusing Copenhagen of weaponizing maritime law to serve NATO's interests. Behind closed doors, however, the tone is reportedly far more alarmed. The Kremlin understands that this move isn't an isolated act. It's part of a larger strategy coordinated among NATO allies to tighten the noose around Russia economically. Losing smooth access through the Baltic would cripple logistics, delay exports, and force Russia to rely more heavily on vulnerable routes like the Arctic and Black Sea, both of which are also under Western surveillance or pressure. Over the past year, tensions in the Baltic region have been steadily rising. Denmark, along with Finland and Sweden, has reported numerous incidents of Russian naval provocations. Russian ships have sailed dangerously close to NATO vessels, interfered with sonar systems, and even simulated aggressive maneuvers in international waters. These standoffs reflect a broader hybrid warfare campaign, Russia testing NATO's resolve while keeping its provocations just below the threshold of open conflict. Denmark's decision to tighten control over its waters can be seen as both a defensive and strategic countermeasure to these provocations. Another key aspect here is infrastructure. The Baltic Sea is filled with undersea cables and pipelines that carry Europe's internet data, energy, and communications. In the past 2 years, several of these cables have been mysteriously damaged, with Western intelligence pointing toward potential Russian involvement. The suspected sabotage of pipelines and communication lines has heightened fears of hybrid warfare, where economic and infrastructure targets become battlegrounds. Denmark's new measures, therefore, aren't just about stopping oil tankers, they're about protecting critical infrastructure and asserting sovereignty in an increasingly militarized sea. For Russia, the economic implications are severe. Since the start of its war in Ukraine, Moscow's access to European markets has been shrinking. Sanctions have pushed it to find alternative buyers, mainly in Asia, but shipping logistics remain a nightmare. The Baltic Sea route, though restricted, has still been a lifeline, allowing Russia to quietly move sanctioned goods through shell companies and reflagged vessels. If Denmark's controls succeed, Russia's export costs could skyrocket. Delays at the Straits could mean millions lost each day in oil revenue, and insurance premiums for Russian vessels could surge even higher. Politically, Denmark's move is a message to Moscow and the world. Small nations can still wield enormous strategic power when geography is on their side. The Danish Straits have always been a choke point, but rarely have they been used this assertively as a geopolitical tool. It also underscores NATO's growing coordination. With Finland and Sweden now formal members, the entire northern flank of Europe is united under one defense umbrella. For Russia, that effectively turns the Baltic Sea into what many analysts are calling a NATO lake, a controlled zone where every movement is monitored. The panic in Moscow isn't just about shipping delays. It's about symbolism. For centuries, Russia has seen itself as a great maritime power, with access to the world's oceans being a marker of status and influence. Being restricted, even indirectly, by a much smaller country like Denmark is humiliating. It undermines Putin's image of control and strength, especially at a time when Russia's military is stretched thin in Ukraine and its economy is under strain from sanctions. Domestically, Russian state media has tried to downplay the situation, framing Denmark's actions as Western hostility rather than a genuine security issue. But behind that propaganda, Russian officials know that losing leverage in the Baltic could have cascading effects on trade, energy exports, and even naval operations in the region. So, what happens next? There are several possible paths. The first is that Moscow might retaliate through hybrid means, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, or maritime intimidation. These tactics allow Russia to respond without direct confrontation. The second is diplomatic escalation, with Russia possibly appealing to international maritime organizations or pressuring neutral countries to criticize Denmark's actions. The third, and most concerning, is a potential naval incident. With tensions already high, any miscalculation could trigger a confrontation between Russian and NATO ships, something both sides likely want to avoid but are dangerously close to. Denmark, meanwhile, is unlikely to back down. Public opinion across Europe strongly favors standing up to Russian aggression, and Copenhagen's actions are consistent with EU sanctions enforcement. The Danish government can justify its measures under maritime safety and environmental protection laws, sidestepping accusations of an outright blockade. In the long run, this could set a precedent for other nations controlling strategic choke points to play a larger role in global security enforcement. At the same time, this event shows how interconnected modern warfare has become. The fight isn't just on the battlefield, it's in shipping lanes, trade routes, and energy corridors. Controlling these arteries can sometimes be more effective than tanks or missiles. Denmark's move, while non-violent, strikes directly at the heart of Russia's wartime economy. In conclusion, Denmark's decision to restrict Russia's Baltic Sea route marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing standoff between Russia and the West. It's a calculated, strategic action that uses geography and law to outmaneuver brute force. Putin's apparent panic reflects not just fear of losing access to the sea, but of losing control over the narrative that Russia is still a global power capable of dictating terms. The Baltic Sea, once a shared space of trade and diplomacy, is now a front line of strategy and influence. As both sides maneuver through this new phase of maritime confrontation, one thing is clear. The balance of power in the north is shifting fast, and Denmark has just made one of the boldest moves yet in Europe's quiet war of control over the seas.